Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
To continue from where we left off in our last lecture, we are contemplating the various mental, imaginative and factual processes that are involved when we approach the task of understanding a book's content and then designing a cover that is appropriate to that content as well as the genre or the category to which that book belongs. Now, there is no escaping the fact that graphic designers and especially book designers must cultivate the habit of reading. If you are designing for a product whose main function is to be read, then you must be a reader yourself. You must know both ends of what we would call the user interface in modern design terminology. The user interface in this case is the page. You are both creating the page, and as a reader, when you are approaching that, you must see for yourself if it is readable, if the spaces are appropriate, etc., etc. Similarly, once you have got the habit of reading, listening to the voice of books, being able to interpret, being able to grasp the subject matter of the books, this is vital. These days we locate our images more and more from the internet, whether we are buying them, whether we are paying the copyright fee or not, whether we are using free images which are royalty free, copyright free, we are still having to search for them on the internet, and the way we search for them is that we actually type in words. The words are most important. These are words that could be mentioned in the design brief that has been sent to us, in the cover brief that has been sent to us. These words could also obviously be words in the title of the book, words in the subtitle of the book. We also often, as designers, cover designers, we look at the table of contents to further understand what are the topics that are covered in this book, what are the chapter titles, what eras are they dealing with, what characters are they dealing with, how has the book been broken down. Perhaps one chapter offers more visual visual stimuli and you can get more visuals from that chapter compared to some other chapters. It is often, especially, all of these apply especially to non-fiction. It is advisable to sometimes read the introduction. If you read the title and you feel it's a bit too mysterious, you're not really quite understanding what's going on, you read the subtitle as well, but again you may be a little confused. It makes a lot of sense to request or ask for even a rough draft of the introduction, because then you realize what the argument in that book is all about, what perspective the author has, what kind of a rationale the author is proposing, and so on and so forth. Sometimes for non-fiction books that have an index at the back, I often look at the index because that also gives me a listing of all the key personalities mentioned in that work. It mentions the key locations, it mentions the significant events or philosophies or ideas, and so sometimes all of these together help me compile a list of search words. They give me ideas for what kind of a visual I can bring onto the cover, what I should be looking for on the internet, and then I apply the search words onto Google and I try and see what is available within my parameters of, say, for example, not having a budget to buy images. So I'm constantly looking at royalty free images, images from which the copyright has lapsed, therefore they are in the public domain. Within that, I try and locate an image which is high resolution enough, which is unusual enough, or in some cases simply appropriate enough for the book that I am designing and the subject matter that is in that book. In the case of fiction, it is, you have slightly more freedom, you can be slightly more interpretive or imaginative, as I would like to say. So you can look at the character. Is there one hero? Is the hero a man or a woman? any other gender that they may be identifying with. Maybe the hero is an alien, maybe the hero is a fantasy character, maybe it's a work of sci-fi, the hero could even be a ghost in a supernatural thriller, right? Who is the hero? What is their age? Is there a defining gender? Is there a defining characteristic, right? If you're looking for a picture of that person, if you're trying to even maybe draw your own artwork of that person, it is important to make sure that the details of that person as you put on the cover match the details as mentioned within the book. If it is mentioned inside the book that they have black hair, then whatever you put, whichever kind of representation you put of that person on the front cover should also therefore have black hair. You must look at the place at which or in which that novel is taking place or the short stories are taking place. Is it a real city? Is it an imagined city? Is it a city at all? Maybe it's a forest, maybe it's suburbia, right? You must pay attention. You can't have a story that is taking place in an imaginary colony situated on Venus. You can't use a Calcutta picture for that, right? You will have to somehow create your illusion of an otherworldly civilization, trying to take the details as they are mentioned in the story, in which case you will possibly have to imagine a specially illustrated cover because there is possibly no factual image that exists of a colony on Venus. What is the time period? Is it a historic novel? Does it deal with, sometime in the 1800s, sometime in the 1700s? It's possible. We've all read period dramas, as you would call them, on, let's say, Netflix or Hotstar or things like that. Drama stories set before our time, way back in history, or it could be contemporary, or it could even be futuristic. Place, the location is important, the time period is important. Is there a particular event or object or location that is referred to? Maybe the story has a haunted clock. Maybe the story is about a young man and his dog, right? Maybe the story is set on a beach somewhere and the ocean, the sea itself plays a very important role in the book, and therefore the sea itself also becomes like as important as a character. What is the tone of the book? Is it a funny book? Is it a serious book? Is it a kind of educational, instructional manual? Is it a book of inspirational quotes? Is it a book that's funny? Is it ironic? Is it very morbid and very dark? A lot of this can be reflected in the kind of illustration that you choose, in the kind of color scheme that you choose, and in the kind of typography that you use. So it's very important to understand that. You can't have a cartoonish looking picture on the cover of a very serious book. Similarly, you can't have a very, very formal, serious, maybe black and white photograph necessarily on a book for children. They might find it boring. You might then have to consider some kind of a hand-drawn portrait, perhaps, something that you can color a little more brightly and make it seem a little more attractive. So all these, the style of the illustration that you choose, the kind of photograph that you're using, even the kind of typeface, the colors that you're using are connected to obviously the category, but even within the category, it could be a funny novel, it could be a sad novel, it could be a novel about heartbreak, it could be a novel about falling in love. All of these involve slight shifts in the kind of image that you choose, the kind of typography that you choose, and the kind of overall look that you give to the book that helps convey the tone. The tone of the book is very important and you must pay attention to it. You could therefore read a chapter or two, if not the whole novel, if there is time, to understand that. Please be careful about representing the book correctly. Therefore, all of this becomes very important, and then of course you decide, do you want to give away the climax of the book on the cover or not? This is something I have discussed earlier. You hint at the content, you kind of, create a sense of curiosity or just a sense of beauty, but you don't give it away. So if the main character is going to perhaps die in the novel, try not to have a picture of them dead on the front cover. The death is obviously some kind of climax. The death is obviously some kind of surprise, and we shouldn't reveal it on the cover. Now, if you look at the two covers that I have got here, they are both by a very, very, very well-known German author called Hans Magnus Enzensberger, who tragically died, unfortunately, last year. So we're very sad about that loss, but wrote many, brilliant books in his lifetime. He wrote fiction, he wrote non-fiction, he wrote what we call micro-histories, he wrote part memoirs, he wrote under false names or pseudonyms. So his body of work is very, very vast. And we at Seagull are very fortunate that we came to know him and that we publish mostly all of his books in English translation. He writes in German, it comes out from the German publishing house first, and then we bring out an English translation. Now, I have deliberately got here two books by the same author to show you the difference in the cover treatment, to show you the difference in picture use, picture choice. The one on the left is a book called Tumult. And I've got a little bit of the write-up here which I will read for you. This entire book is derived from old papers, notes, jottings, photos and letters. So it's the text inside is like a collage. This volume is about the many places that Enzensberger visited and the people he met on his travels through the Soviet Union and Cuba during the 1960s. It captures his personal experience as a left-wing sympathizer during that tumultuous decade and focuses on political events and their participants. So I hit upon, having read through the blurb, having read through a bit of the book, I realized what is important here is the political events and their participation, participating in them, the people who began these events. Often a very basic kind of political event for the average citizen is to march in protest, to voice their protest in a collective way, to march through the streets of a city. And as you can see here, I did my visual research. I spent some time reading up the places he had visited and seeing what had happened in those places in the 60s. And from even reading through the text, I found the name of a particular protest, a march that had been very important and at that time, and which he has written about. So remember, a march happening in the places he had visited and mentioned in the book, as opposed to any citizens' protest happening anywhere else in the world. Okay, there is a logic here, there is a location and a time and a place, and the photograph that I have chosen respects all of that. The details of the photograph appear on the back of the book, so readers will realize, therefore, what it is. It is mandatory to give a photograph credit and to reproduce the photograph caption if there is such a caption. In this case, the photograph resolution was not big enough to fill the entire front cover. So immediately I decided, let the photo be at the bottom, let the name, etc. appear on the top. Hans Magnus Enzensberger is quite well known. Let his name be the first thing that you see. Then we have the word tumult. The word tumult means, sort of chaos in some form or the other, uprising, chaos, not so much even uprising, tumultuous times, very chaotic times, lots of things going on. So the lines that I've drawn going across the title are reproducing that sense of chaos. You're having a little bit of difficulty reading it. You have to look twice to understand. You will see how I have deliberately dropped the two U's. The two U's have dropped down the line. The word follows exactly a single line. Note how Enzensberger's R is more or less aligned to the outer edge of the red T. And we have very clear space for the name of the translator as well. So the top part is being used for the typography, the bottom part is being used for the photograph. This is a work of non-fiction. This is a real book. The events in here, the people he met, the uprisings he describes, the tumultuous times that he talks about, these are all real, and the book cover conveys that. I have not put the picture of an abstract uprising or vague sense of chaos. This is very much a real protest, a documentary photograph that is available in the public domain, and I identified it by going through the book and locating the name. The second book cover is much more imaginative in a different kind of way, because it's very interesting. It's also by Hans Magnus Enzensberger. The name of the book is Gone, but not forgotten. And what is important actually is the subtitle of this book. On the right hand side in the green box, you can see the subtitle, and it says, My Favorite Flops and Other Projects That Came to Nothing. So this book actually compiles many of his ideas that were failures. He tried to do a radio show that failed. Maybe he tried to write a play and have it performed, but it didn't work out. He began writing many more novels. Some of them finished well, some of them didn't. This book is a compendium of his failures. And he questions something that he says is that, I hope it will help us reflect on the very nature of success and failure by which we measure our lives. Are all our abandoned projects really failures? How bad are those ideas that we think of to ourselves as failures? Were they failures at all? Did they not teach us anything? Did we not learn anything from them? So here the idea was, at least in my mind, the idea of an artist messing around in his studio, experimenting with forms of writing, experimenting with forms of expressing himself, some working, some not working, many abandoned, many just, were considered works in progress. So I found in the public domain a royalty-free image of an artist studio. As you can see, paint, brushes, water, etc. splattered about. And this was my interpretation of the idea of these failures or works in progress. The cover does not have a finished work of art, right? It is the space where works of art are made. Some get finished, some get abandoned, and that is the space that he is inhabiting in this book. So it's the same writer, but he has written two very different kinds of books, which the category of the book, this is kind of part memoir, this is of course serious, it could be history, it's non-fiction, it's political science. The category, the seriousness, the kind of writing, the subject matter is therefore reflected through the covers. Here we have three other books. The one on the left is a translation of a very beautiful, radical, unusual Bengali novel by a writer who sort of almost achieved cult status and again died much earlier than he should have, whose name was Nobarun Bhattacharya, or Nobarun Bhattacharya as we would say in the Bengali. It's a work of literary fiction. It's been translated from the Bengali, and I was the translator. I also happened to be the cover designer, and you will see how when I have pulled out elements on this cover, I have deliberately left space on the left hand side for the text. So when I was doing my visuals, no matter how strong the visuals are, I have created emptiness so that I can have the title of the book, the name of the author very clearly visible. They are not being swallowed up by the collage, even though there are many elements to the collage. And because I was a translator over here, one of the things that's very interesting in the course of this book is this young man called Herbert, after whom the story, the novel is named. Herbert is a very troubled young man. He has had all sorts of life experiences, and in the course of the novel, sometimes when he goes for a walk through the city, he mutters under his breath the words cat, bat, water, dog, fish. And you can see on the cover, there is a cat. Right on the top left corner, you can see the wings of a bat. So that's cat, bat. There are waves of water at the bottom, the blue lines, that's water. There is the dog. And then, of course, you can see the blue fish. And there is another very beautiful moment in that book, which involves a mermaid. And so I also have a mermaid on the side. So you can see how I have literally pulled words out of the content and created this cover. And while creating the collage for the cover, I remembered that there must be some area left, some blank, uncluttered area left in order to have the text be able to breathe. The second cover that I have here is a cover for a book by Carlo Ginzburg, a very important Italian philosopher. There were 5 particular essays in this book. One of the essays is called The Soul of Brutes. in which he talks about the fact that animals have souls as well. So it's a very beautiful name. We chose to name the whole book after that one essay. And when I read that particular essay before I started to work on the cover, I found mention. He goes through historical sources, he reads a variety of historical texts in a variety of languages, and there are many early writings where many early philosophers, social observers have said that animals have souls. Somebody has talked about birds having souls, somebody has talked about underwater creatures having souls, somebody has said the dog definitely, the cat, and so on. So I pulled out those animals. The book is called The Soul of Brutes. I read the essay called The Soul of Brutes, and I pulled out animals, etc. from that particular essay, and I created this cover artwork. And once again, I left enough room for the author's name and the title of the book, because like I said, he is very well known and we do want to highlight his name. We don't want it getting lost on the cover. On the right hand side, we have a cover design for a book by another German writer who we are lucky is still with us. He's been writing for a long time. He's also a filmmaker, and his writing is quite extraordinary because somehow he manages to infuse fiction with the spirit of documentary, or documentary with the spirit of fiction, however you want to look at it. He does make things up, but he makes the most extraordinary connections, traveling through time, traveling through history, through politics and so on, and writes these truly incredible books. His name is Alexander Kluge. He writes in German, and again at Seagull Books we are very fortunate that we get to publish his works in the English. In this particular book by Alexander Kluge, as you can see, the title is called Kong's Finest Hour. It deals with the character of King Kong. Some of you may have heard of this character called King Kong, the giant gorilla. There was a movie made about King Kong, and he then comes into New York City. There's a woman he's fallen in love with. He takes the whole city apart, etc., etc. It's quite an iconic movie. So Kong's Finest Hour, Alexander Kluge imagines what is happening to King Kong, starts off with the King Kong story. King Kong comes, he falls in love with this woman, then maybe he's been captured, he's put into a circus, people come to watch him, and then he just takes off from there and starts making lots of zigzag crisscross connections about lots of other episodes from the story of mankind. But Kong's Finest Hour, the starting and the ending point is the story of King Kong, and therefore I found an old poster of a King Kong movie and have then used it, have adapted it. As you can see, this is King Kong. He was such a giant gorilla. He's got the woman in one hand, he's got an aeroplane in the other. He's so tall, he reaches into the skies. So in this book, Kong's Finest Hour, the clue is in the title. Kong is a reference to King Kong, and therefore that was my starting point to find a visual. Please note that in this, the visual is sitting towards the slightly lower side, and there is enough flat area on the top to fit the title and the name of the author very comfortably. Alexander Kluge is a very well-known writer, so his name is very, very big and the title is small. The logic is that people will be drawn to his name and then they will read what the book is about. So the title could be a little smaller. It's not a problem. You must be open to reading, not only reading the book that you are designing, but also reading other books. You don't have to always read in English. You can read in whatever language you are familiar with. But if you hope to work in design around books, the more you read, the more words you have in your head, the more kinds of styles of writing you learn to, respond to, you learn to understand, your vocabulary expands. You get used to multiple voices. What does fiction sound like? Different voices in fiction, different kinds of non-fiction. What does a travel book sound like? What does an academic book sound like? What does poetry sound like? And so on. So the more you can read in whichever language, the more you become attuned to reading and remembering words, understanding what is said, sometimes even understanding what has not been said. This reading also helps you remember. It helps you remember things you've read in other books. When you read online and you make a habit to read online, maybe 1 hour or 2 hours a day, depending on what it is that, what your other commitments in life are. But online research is also very useful. You must train your mind, however, to remember. What did you read where? What picture did you see on which website? Do you have a list of websites that you like to visit? Do you have a list of sites where you like to go for information? Do you have a list of online dictionaries that you like to consult? Do you have a list of design blogs that you follow? Do you follow other book cover designers? Do you follow publishing houses to stay updated on what kind of books they're bringing out, what kind of covers they're doing? You must be able to remember. A large part of graphic design is to read a word and recall an image. It's not possible to download every image on the planet into your computer, and you don't need to. But as time goes by, as you gain experience, you will realize you can remember one particular website is great for historic images, another website is great for art images, another place is great for photographs. You have to cultivate what I call a visual memory. And there is absolutely no substitute for research. Researching the area, researching the time, researching the location, researching the subject matter. You don't have to do a PhD on it, but you have to understand, especially if it is a subject you're not familiar with. It could be a book set in a country or even a part of your own country that you have never visited, that you have never been to, you may be unfamiliar. So there is absolutely no substitute for research. If you were trying to draw the main character, maybe you need to look at photographs of what women were wearing at that time, or men were wearing, or what kind of uniform the soldiers were wearing. It depends on what you're doing. So visual research, textual research, there is absolutely no substitute for. What kind of an image do you want to use, and where will you find it? You can use the Google search option. Go to Google Images. The regular Google gives you a list of websites. Look on the top of your Google search, the whole page that opens up when you open up your browser. Look for Google Images. Go to Google Images and word by word by word, all those words that you had made a list of related to the content, you type them in and you start looking at the images, right? When you're trying to do your image search, when you're starting to download images, this is where all those words will come in useful. Please make sure anything that you're downloading, double check, triple check whether you are able to use it for commercial use or not. Many places will say you must pay for the use of this image. Many websites don't, but they have laws, they have licenses that are very specific. Some will say you can use it and you can use it free, but you need to submit an online form to download it from us. Some people will say just take it and use it, not a problem, but remember to credit us. Some will say here's a tiny little JPEG just for you to see. If you want the high resolution version, you must pay a fee and then download it. So be very careful. Always remember what I told you earlier. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's free. You may also decide to use a photo that you yourself have taken. You may also decide to use maybe an image that you have drawn or created. Absolutely no problem. Please make sure it is 300 dpi and slightly larger than the size of your cover, because if you remember the diagrams I've been drawing the last few days, the cover image has to be slightly bigger than the cover because you need to give an excess area to the printer for good printing, and that excess area is called bleed. Now, if you do use somebody else's artwork, a painting done by somebody, a photograph taken by somebody else, you could be getting it directly from the artist, or you could be buying it from a stock photo agency. If you do so, there are some terms and conditions that you must keep in mind. Please send them a mock-up of the cover along with a request for permission. Download a low-res image, do the cover with it, put your text, etc., and then send them an email and say, I found your image, I found this image on the internet, I think it's absolutely perfect for this book that I'm designing. This, if you permit, this is what the design will look like. I'm sending you the mock-up. It's called the mock-up. I'm sending you the mock-up. Please let me know if A, you approve of the design, B, if you think I can use it at all, C, how much would you need to be paid for the use of this image on the cover. And of course, you must also reassure them that you will credit them for this use and of course pay them. Under these circumstances, please make sure you've checked with the publisher whether they have a budget to buy such image use rights or not. Sometimes the publisher will say, yes, we use this particular stock agency, we have an account with them, any images that you download, please use this stock agency. Sometimes publishers will say, no, I'm so sorry, we don't have money to buy an image, please find a royalty free, copyright free image for which we don't have to pay. Once you have asked them for that fee, you must then pay that fee or ask the publisher to pay that fee. This must be conducted via email so that all the correspondence is there. If you change your mind, the photographer changes their mind, the publisher changes their mind, make sure you have all this in writing. The approval or the source of that image. If a photographer says, yes, you can use my photo, when you finally design the cover, you must say cover photograph by and then give the name of that photographer, or cover art by, and then you must give the name of the artist. Here I have a variety of covers for you which I have designed. In the case of all these covers, my limitation, you can say, or my job was made. On the one hand, you can say it was a limitation because it took away my choice, but on the other hand, it made my task very easy for me because each of these books came with images inside them, and I simply chose what I felt was the best image for the cover. And when I was choosing that image, what I was keeping in mind is that did that picture have blank area for text? Which image in the book has the most clear, undisturbed area to hold the title, to hold the name of the author? That was my priority. All of these book covers, as you can see, they are images that were present in the book itself. In some cases, I have just created perhaps a little label kind of area. So the one on the top left, the book called Rome, I've created that little white area to hold my text. But in the book just underneath it, the book called Dancing Odyssey, that beautiful picture of the Odyssey dancer existed in the book itself, and all I did was put it, and I have used the position of her two hands as an anchor to determine the alignment of the text on the cover. If you look at the top, absolutely top right cover, the one with the multicolored circles, that was a painting done. This was actually a volume of poetry. The woman who's written it, she's a poet, she's also an artist. She had sent us this image. I found it very beautiful. I put it on the front cover, and I've taken the center of the circle to decide that my text must also be center aligned. If you look at the cover just underneath it, the cover that says Singing Emptiness, this was a very tricky cover to do because while the book is vertical, the cover image is horizontal, and I was not allowed by the artist to spread it. Even if I spread it, half of it would fall off the front cover. So I kept it smaller. I kept it towards the bottom, and then I've picked out a shade of green from the cover, put it at the back to fill up the rest of the cover, and then I have simply organized the 3 lines of text, which is the title, the subtitle, and the name of the author. The shade of blue that I have used in the title is from the painting itself. Here I have found copyright-free public domain images by famous artists. So there is the yellow one is by a very well-known German artist called Egon Schiele. The third one, the Mahashweta Devi book, has a painting by our artist K.G. Subramanian. The one next to it, the one called Karimai, has a painting by the painter Madhavi Parekh, and so on and so forth. There is a detail of Van Gogh's Starry Night. If you look below on the second row, the other yellow book at the bottom, which is called Listening to the Loom, that features the work of a painter, an artist called Mahmood Hussain. So you can either get permission from a living artist or locate paintings in the public domain whose copyright period has passed, and depending on if they match up to the content or not, you may then use either the full painting or a detail of that painting on a book cover. Sometimes, if you look at the right hand side, the one at the bottom, the smaller cover called Guerrilla Movements in Latin America, that is a mural or a painting by Diego Rivera, and it was difficult to put text on it, so I created that purple panel as a placeholder for text. Sometimes on very busy pictures, sometimes on very busy paintings, it's difficult to find a native area for text, and we need to create a placeholder, as I call it, on which we can then fit the text. These cover designs have been designed almost like a collage. Different elements exist simultaneously. 2 or more pictures, 2 or more or 3, 4 kinds of pictures. Some have a grayscale, some have a colored picture, some have a picture that has been flipped. If you look at the lower right hand side, the same picture of the plant has just been repeated on the top of the cover and then flipped to create that enclosing effect and to give me an area for the text. These have all been created by using royalty-free stock images available freely on the internet. When I downloaded each of these photographs, I made sure that their owners had said it is free both for commercial use and for personal use, and that they don't mind if text is put on them or if they are modified in some way. Sometimes people say, yes, you can use it however you want, but you can't modify it. Or yes, you can use it wherever you want, but you can't put text on it. But these, the creators had specified you could do whatever you wanted to on them. So I have downloaded the photograph. On that, in some cases, I have added embellishments depending on the content and what the content can support. In some cases, just the beauty of the image was good enough. And then when I designed the back cover, I made sure I put the name not only of the photographer but also of the website that is hosting these images and doing such a great service for those cover designers or graphic designers who can't afford very big budgets for their images. What kind of image preparation do you need to do? In Photoshop, go to Image, then Image Size, check the width and the height of the image. Make sure they are slightly larger than the eventual cover you're supposed to design. Very importantly, check that it is 300 dpi. 300 dpi is the minimum the resolution of an image for print. The color mode for all images, if they are colored, they should be CMYK. If they are black and white, it should be grayscale in Photoshop. We do not work with RGB images. If you have erased a part of the picture to cut out a detail, maybe it was a flower against a background, you have deleted the background and you only want the flower, therefore you want the background to be transparent when you bring it into your typesetting software. In that case, save as a Photoshop document. When you get the option in format to do a save as, choose Photoshop document and you will notice the file extension for that becomes .psd. This is very important to remember. If you haven't done any deleting, you don't want transparency, then the file format when you're working in print is the TIFF. We don't work with JPEGs or GIFs or PNGs because those are highly compressed formats and they affect resolution. Save, even if you have downloaded an RGB JPEG, save as a CMYK or a grayscale TIFF file. Please remember this. Please rename all your files. Please start a new folder in your computer into which you can put all your final Photoshop save as files. Please throw away all the low-res JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, etc. even before you actually begin your design. Otherwise, you might bring them into your design by mistake. It is better to have more images than less. Remember, at some point, you will also have to design the spine. You will also have to design the back cover and you'll have to go back and repeat the search process. So instead of doing the same work twice, when you are downloading the initial images, just make sure you have more, no problem. Usually there is one instinctive version of the cover that will flash through your mind. This will happen right at the start from the time you read the design brief. Stick with that idea and see how Photoshop and Quark Express or InDesign, whatever you're using, can help you execute it best. Sometimes it doesn't work, I get angry and I say, damn it, I drink a lot of coffee and I get back to work. Try to not repeat yourself. Every cover you create must use, or at least attempt to use, colors and styles that were different from the last cover that you designed. You may become known for a particular look, but you should be able to design across all looks, all styles. You are not competing with other designers, but with yourself. Every cover you do, try and make it better than the last one that you did. Imagine an exhibition of your covers 20 years later. Will there be enough variety, or will all your covers look the same? If you have 4 or 5 ideas, try them all out. You might end up coming up with a 6th, which combines ideas from all of the others. When I look for inspiration, where do I go? I look always at other book covers, either at home, in a library. Sometimes if I'm lucky and there's a bookshop in town, then I'll go to the bookshop. I also look at Amazon or Flipkart, wherever books are available. I look up blogs. You can go to Google and type book designer blogs, book designer websites, and you can you can bookmark them, and you can visit them every few weeks or every few months for inspiration. As I've just mentioned, you can look up designer websites, publisher websites, online magazines and journals. I always look a lot at Instagram as well. On Instagram, I don't necessarily keep myself restricted to only graphic design or book covers, but I also look at, ceramics. I look at people working with textiles, all kinds of handicraft. I look at people who are weaving, people working with terracotta, 3D objects, all sorts of things, because it all adds up in your head. All the colors that you're seeing, all the textures that you're seeing, it all adds up and feeds your brain. I look at product packaging. Sometimes when I go to the shops, I'm looking at the boxes, the bottles, the tins, the cans, what kind of typography are they using, what kind of packaging, what does the toothpaste box look like, what does the soap box look like, what does the shoe box look like, and so on. If you remember, some of you are too young to know what a vinyl means, but it basically means an LP record. LP record covers have always also been a significant place for designers to kind of, showcase the times, be edgy, come up with very inventive looks, ideas and typography. It also applies to CD designs. If you have a Spotify account, if you are on the App Store, you can always also go and look at the little app icons. I have a great time sometimes just looking at them and trying to figure out what they've tried to build into that little square that looks like a button. That's all that they have. It's almost the idea similar to a book cover, and somehow that button has to look attractive enough that makes you want to download the app. Look at textiles. Textiles are all around you. If you go for a walk, look at the clothes people are wearing. If you go to a furnishing shop, look at the curtains, look at bed covers, look at saris, shirts, pants, everything. Everything has color, everything has design. The best place, of course, to refresh yourself is to look at nature. Animals, their colors, birds, fish, all sorts of plants, all sorts of flowers. They have the most glorious colors. They also have the most beautiful symmetry. They are balanced. Imagine a leaf where the stem kind of goes through the middle, and then you have a kind of, the leaf, the greens on either side. So I love looking at nature. I love looking at, nature documentaries. It's very, very remarkable and astonishing, the color palette, how it changes from country to country, and how the animals, creatures, insects that dwell in those different habitats, how their colors also change. So, they can blend in with the environment because their coloring there is their camouflage. That camouflage protects them. So it's very, very interesting to see. I've already mentioned ceramics. When you're watching TV, when you're watching things on the online platforms, look not only at the plot, you're looking at the title credits. What is the typography used? What does that film poster look like? When the film begins, is it a very bright color palette? Is it a muted color palette? Look at what the hero is wearing. Look at what the heroine is wearing, right? What kind of family do they belong to? How have the costumes been designed? How have the homes been designed? Is it a middle class home, low income home? How are the surroundings? How is the film being? Because it's all artificial. It's all been designed. It's all been created. So look at those. You can go for a walk. You can sit quietly and think for a little while. And for me, of course, coffee never fails. Coffee doesn't have to work with everybody. Just a glass of water can sometimes be enough. And as I wind this up, just some reminders. Set some limits for yourself. It is not possible for everyone to do everything in the same one and only cover. So you must begin where I always say, which is with the content. Please remember what the book is about. Remember also sometimes what you're good at, what are your skills. And then once in a while, just to challenge yourself, get out of your comfort zone and try working with some aspect either of typography or of images that you're not good at. If you think you don't like blue, try and work with blue. If you think you don't like more than 2 colors, one day try and work with 3. Step back and look at the cover from an absolutely objective standpoint and ask yourself, would I buy this book? Be open to constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is somebody with more experience, somebody who can guide you, or sometimes it could be the publisher or the author. They could say, can you make the title a little bigger? Can you make this a little smaller? Maybe if you move it to the left or to the right. Be open to this kind of discussion. Don't have too many fonts. Don't go crazy with Photoshop effects. Putting 5 different Photoshop filters, this is not an Instagram reel. Putting 5 different Photoshop filters does not ensure a fabulous cover. Everybody now can tell that you have applied a Photoshop filter. So if you do apply a filter, you have to be so clever that people can't tell. Don't put all your ideas into the same cover. Sometimes the original or the favorite idea will not work out well. Be prepared to accept defeat. It's very hard to let go of that idea, but you must abandon it. If it's not working, you must be able to tell yourself. You must be able to objectively look and say, this was a great idea, but somehow it's not translating into a great design. So let's move away from this. Do I have a plan B? Look at other covers. Look at them from the design point of view. Don't look at another cover and say, oh, this is a very skilled designer. Oh, they must have had a huge image budget. Oh, they must have this, that, and the other. Not important. You can have a 5-star kitchen setup, but you can still be a lousy cook. So when you look at a design that works for you, start thinking like a designer. When you look at that visual, ask yourself, why do I like that? Because the font is large. I like it because the font is thick. Maybe next time I can work with a thick font. I like it because it has one central visual. Next time I'll try and work with a central visual, right? Think of the elements. It doesn't matter what the visual is and where they got it from. How have they placed it? How have they treated it? How are they doing the work with that in relation to the text? Look at those things rather than saying, oh, they must be having lakhs and lakhs of rupees and they must be buying images from all over the world. That is not necessarily true. This brings me to the end of my theoretical discussions on the various aspects of the book, and I hope from the next one, I hope you are now sort of mentally well prepared to tackle both book and cover design. You have some idea of what it entails, and my next few lectures will start to teach you and share with you the practical aspects of everything that I have talked about so far.
Hello, I am A.K. Sharma and I teach sociology in IIT Kanpur. You may ask, how do sociologists view religion? Religion is becoming an important issue for our society. Now, sociologists, this is true that sociologists explain one thing in terms of other things of society. So, religion, if you ask sociologists to explain religion, they will explain religion in terms of other things of society like education, economic development. In sociology of religion, there are two major traditions actually. In one tradition, to use language of methodology, in one tradition religion is a dependent variable, in another tradition religion is an independent variable. What I mean is that in the view of Karl Marx, who said that religion is the opium of the working class, religion is closely associated with contradictions or relations of class in society. Marx believed that as time passes, societies evolve, and this evolution of society is dialectical, like from a classless society to a class society, class formation, and eventually again a classless society will emerge. Karl Marx believed that laws of human behavior or laws of society are specific to a stage of development of society and are closely associated with mode of production or tools and techniques of production and ownership of tools and techniques of production. To Karl Marx, who think that a modern society is a capitalist society, religion is the dependent variable which needs to be explained in terms of class relations. And when he says that religion is the opium of the working class, it means that religion is used by the powerful class, the class which owns the means of production, to legitimize their class position or to confuse the workers. Let the workers think that if they are poor, if they are exploited, and if they suffer from various kinds of problems, it is because of their fate or their deeds in the previous births, and not develop the revolutionary consciousness to analyze the real causes of their poverty or exploitation or ill health. This is one view, and religion is the dependent variable, which also means that tomorrow in socialist society or in communist society, if it ever emerges and society becomes classless once again, religion may not exist. Now, according to another view, Max Weber, religion is actually the independent variable that explains emergence of something else, and that something else is the emergence of capitalism. Max Weber said that unlike in the Hindu countries or the Muslim countries or Christian countries where influence of Catholic Christianity was rampant, capitalism, as we understand by capitalist institutions, capitalism could not have developed. It does not mean that people, Hindus or Muslims or Catholic Christians, they were not acquisitive in nature, but there was a difference between them and those influenced by Protestant ethics in certain countries of Western Europe, and the difference was that these people did not use what they earned from their enterprises for comforts or for saving or for security or for status or prestige, but whatever they earned from their enterprise, they further invested this in the enterprise itself, and they lived simple life. By living simple life and spending the earnings back in the enterprise leads to emergence of capitalism in Western Europe. Here you see that religion is the cause. So, at some point of time, some philosopher, his name was Calvin, who gave a new turn to Christianity and propounded the philosophy of a new philosophy of Protestantism, also called Puritanism, the theory of predestination, which created anxiety in people's mind to know whether they are elect or not, whether after their death they will go to hell or heaven. So, this reinvesting in enterprise and not using the profits for their own gains or for their own comforts, this produce capitalist society or industrialization, in simple language industrialization, or this produce economic development first in the countries of Northwest Europe. And another issue which sociology tackles with regard to religion is whether we are secularizing. Now, it has been found that in the Western countries with urbanization, economic development, industrialization, education, democracy, there is a fall in religiosity. But in our country, secularization is defined in a different way, because we are a plural society, and for thousands of years all religions have been juxtaposed in our country. So, we define secularization as a process in which state maintains equal distance from all the religions, but does not become irreligious state. So, but this kind of definition or this approach of state obviously is going to raise new issues, new social problems, and religious issues, other issues, but this is what it is. So, sociologists of religion will also study this process of tensions in the process of secularization in a plural country like India. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to this piece of literary snippet. Perhaps the most popular literary genre after novel is the short story. Sharp, compact narratives whose charm lies not only in what is said, but also in what remains unsaid. Today I will be reading one of the shortest instances of a short story that I have ever encountered, and indeed the very charm of this particular story that I am going to read out today lies in the way it abruptly ends. It is an ancient tale from Mesopotamia which has been retold by several authors, among whom the name of Somerset Maugham stands out. The adaptation that I will be reading out is perhaps the closest to the one that Maugham wrote. The story is titled, in all of its adaptations almost, as Appointment in Samarra. Here is the story. A merchant in Baghdad once sent one of his servants to the market. The servant was supposed to buy provisions for the merchant, but when he returned, he came back empty-handed. Indeed, the servant had all gone white, and trembling with fear, he told his master that he had met death in the marketplace. When I entered the market, the servant said to his master, I was jostled by a woman, and when I turned to look at her, I saw that she was death. I am very scared, master, because death looked at me with a threatening gesture. Can you please lend me your horse so that I can fly away from Baghdad to the town of Samarra and thereby escape death? The master, being a good man, gave his servant his best horse and saw him gallop off to Samarra to escape death. Then the master himself went to the marketplace and confronted death. Why did you make a threatening gesture to my servant? Asked the master to death. And death replied, it was not a threatening gesture. Rather, it was a start of surprise. I was astonished to see your servant here today, because this evening I have an appointment with him in Samarra. See you in the next episode of Literary Snippet.